All right, today we're tackling a big one. We're going to try and unlock the heart of what is, let's be honest, probably the Bible's most intimidating book, Leviticus.
Yeah, you know the one I'm talking about. It's the book that's famous for bringing those read the Bible in a year plans to a grinding, screeching halt, right? It just seems so technical, full of bizarre rules and, well, kind of irrelevant. But what if I told you that's not the whole story? Not even close.
So this is the big idea, the massive reframe we're going to make. What you think is just a book of dry, ancient rules is actually a blueprint for a vibrant, living relationship with God. And seriously, once you grasp this one thing, it's like the key that unlocks the entire book.
Okay, so let's dive in. And we're going to start with the book's name and who it was even for in the first place. Because, spoiler alert, our first assumption here, it's almost always wrong.
See, the common idea is that Leviticus is basically a super technical instruction manual just for the priest, right? Something for the religious professionals of the day. But its original Hebrew context, it tells a completely different story.
The book's original name in Hebrew tells you so much. It's Vayikra, and that means simply, and he called. Think about that. This isn't some secret memo whispered to a select few. It's a call, a summons, to the entire nation to draw near. It's an open invitation for everyone to step into God's presence.
Okay, so if the whole book is a call to draw near to God, then we have got to tackle its single biggest and probably most misunderstood concept, and that is holiness.
So let me just ask you straight up. When you hear that word holy, what's the first thing that pops into your head? For most of us, it's probably something about moral perfection, right? Being flawless.
And right there, we see this huge gap between our modern idea and what it originally meant in Hebrew. We think perfect or flawless, but the Hebrew is communicating something much more like being set apart or distinct or different.
The word is kadash, and it's not about achieving some perfect performance record. It's about being separated for a divine purpose. So God isn't saying, be perfect just like me. He's saying, live differently because you belong to me. And wow, that changes everything.
Okay, so this naturally brings us to the next. Let's call it a hurdle, the offerings and the sacrifices. I know for a lot of people, this is where Leviticus just feels archaic and honestly kind of brutal. But again, what if we've been looking at it all wrong?
We have this tendency to see the whole sacrificial system as just a list of fines, right? Penalties for when you mess up. But in reality, they were designed as access points. Think of them as invitations to draw near to God after something had broken the relationship.
And again, the language tells the story. The Hebrew word for offering is korban, and its root literally means to draw near. That tells you everything. The focus wasn't on what was being lost, the animal, but on what was being gained, renewed access to God. It was a pathway, not a penalty. Huge difference.
So, with this new way of thinking about holiness and offerings, let's see how these big ideas actually shaped the practical, everyday laws for the people. Now, those categories of clean and unclean, they sound really judgmental to our modern ears, don't they? We hear dirty, sinful, or shameful. But in ancient Hebrew thought, it was all about ritual readiness. Clean simply meant you were able to approach God's sacred space. Unclean meant you were temporarily unable to. See, it was about protection, not rejection.
And what about all those famous dietary laws? The whole don't eat pork thing. A lot of people just assume it was ancient health advice, like trying to avoid parasites. But the primary goal was actually about identity. These laws were specifically designed to make Israel a distinct, set-apart culture, totally different from the pagan nations all around them.
But maybe the most surprising thing of all is what lies at the very heart of this so-called Book of Rules. It's one of the most profound statements on relationship you'll find anywhere in Scripture.
You absolutely know this quote. It's the heart of Jesus' ethical teaching, right? The cornerstone of what it means to live a life of faith.
But if you ever stop to ask, where did Jesus get that from? Was this some brand new idea? Was he introducing a radical concept nobody had ever heard before?
Nope, he was quoting Leviticus. That's right there in chapter 19, smack in the middle of all those purity laws, is the command to love your neighbor as yourself. This proves it. Holiness was never meant to be about ritual isolation. It has always been about being profoundly relational.
And you can see this relational core perfectly illustrated in the high priest. I mean, his clothes weren't just fancy decorations, they were theology you could see and touch. He physically carried the names of all 12 tribes on gemstones right over his heart. His breastplate of judgment was a symbol of his role as mediator, and on his forehead a gold plate was inscribed with the words "Holy to the Lord," declaring his entire purpose. He was literally a living, walking symbol of the connection between God and his people.
So okay, as we start pulling all these different threads together, the picture gets a lot clearer, right? The structures, the laws, the festivals, they were all serving one ultimate purpose.
Take the sacred festivals. These were way more than just holidays. Leviticus actually calls them the Lord's appointed times. They were like a prophetic calendar, a divine roadmap that was slowly revealing God's bigger plan of redemption. From the Passover lamb all the way to the Day of Atonement, every single feast was pointing forward to something God was going to do in the future.
So let's do a quick recap of this whole great reframing. Holiness is not perfection, it's distinction. Offerings, they're not penalties, they're about access. Uncleanness, it's not about your value, it's about your ability to approach. The law, it's not just rules, its heart is loving your neighbor. And maybe most important of all, holiness isn't something you achieve. God himself says, "I am the Lord who makes you holy." It's a gift.
So in the end, this book of Leviticus, the one so many of us skip, was never, ever about creating barriers to keep people away from God. It has always been a divine roadmap, showing us exactly how to draw near,